Recently, I had the good fortune of sitting down with the delightful Moya Pyper Robinson. Now, Moya is a true Elizabeth original, having arrived here as a young girl with her family in 1956, just a few short months after Elizabeth's official opening and naming day in November 1955. And in this little chat, she sat down with myself and her good friend Kerry to talk about growing up in Elizabeth in the 50s and 60s, Friday nights at Court Ballroom at Elizabeth City Centre, concerts at the Octagon, and life married to her beloved Ken for nearly 38 years. Enjoy.
No, we arrived on the Himalaya in 56. Dad came here for British Aerospace for a 2-year stint. While we were here, my brother was born. And we went back, he was in March 59, and we went back after 2 years stint to England.
Where did you live in England?
Bristol.
Okay.
And
Why did you go back? Because that's actually a
Dad
very
was
common
out for
story.
2 years.
Right, okay.
Because we weren't £10 poms or £5 poms or
So
whatever it was.
He
Was to help set up down at WRE, which is DSTO now, but it was Weapons Research Establishment back then. And he was with British Aerospace. And at the end of the 2 years, the company sent them back to the family back to England. Of course, Mum didn't want to be back in the cold. She'd made so many great friends here in Australia. Asked if the company could give them a permanent posting, which they did. And as I was saying before, they were able to keep the house that they were in. The furniture was all still there, so that it was just send them back. And we came back on a Comet. Dad came back in one of the British Aerospace planes that they'd been testing, a jet.
Wow.
So he flew back in that. And when we flew back, we were in the very front of the car. Now, I don't remember this, I've been told this, but we were at the very front of the plane. Mum had my brother at the bulkhead. I was on the other side, and I do remember being sung to put me to sleep, The Little White Bull by Tommy Steele.
Tommy Steele.
Really?
Yeah.
Tommy Steele was on his tour of Australia, and I'll
Wow.
never forget when we arrived in Australia, we climbed down. Of course, you got off on the tarmac in those days. We climbed down the stairs, and I said to him, "We're in Australia now." And he said, "How do you know that?" And I said, "Because the sun's shining."
Wow.
You've been held by a famous person, haven't you, before as a baby?
Yes, that was back in England. When we went back to England for that 1959, my father's brother was he ran some of the big theatre systems in England, and he was doing one of the shows, and my dad was doing some MC work for this particular show because he had a beautiful Irish lilt. Anyway, he was on there waiting to go on stage, and so the person on stage had just finished their act, and Dad was supposed to go out and interview the next act. Sorry, I'll start that again. Dad was supposed to go out and introduce the next act. Of course, he's holding me because my mum had gone to the toilet. And he's thinking, what is it? So he just went, "Here, hold her." Went on stage, introduced the next act, came back out, said, "Thank you very much," took him back. It was only old Blue Eyes himself.
No way.
Yes, Ray.
Wow. That's amazing.
Frank.
Yeah.
Yeah.
By Frank.
Frank Sinatra. That's very cool.
So
Sorry.
I haven't washed myself since.
And when you guys came over, what area did you actually settle in?
Okay, so we flew back in the Comet, as I said, and I've since found out that the Comet is probably one of the most dangerous planes that was ever built for flying.
Wow.
Anyway, so we came back to Elizabeth South, and we lived there from, as I said, from 1956 until halfway through 1968, we moved to the Elizabeth Park. Right. And my mum and dad still lived there till my father passed away, and Mum passed away in 2017. So she still lived in that house to there. So she only ever had 2 houses in Elizabeth.
Wow, amazing.
And still kept friends from the day that she arrived, were still friends until the day that she died.
Yeah.
So,
well, there was that community bond, wasn't there?
Exactly.
Because you all arrived, I mean, your parents and people of that generation left Europe not long after World War II. I mean, they were leaving
Villages.
shattered lives in many cases, coming
and no
here to
family.
rebuild.
They only had friends as family. In fact, as children, we didn't call our neighbours Mr. and Mrs. Smith or Mr. and Mrs.
aunties,
Irwin. It was uncle and auntie.
I
And
was
in
the
fact,
same,
the
yeah.
next door neighbours were Brian and Gwen Irwin. He was actually a very good trumpeter in those days, and they became Nana and Grandad to us.
Yeah.
We didn't call them Uncle and Auntie. They were my surrogate Nana and Grandad. Upon arrival, my father was the youngest of 13 children, and his oldest brother was 18 when he left Ireland to come to Australia. My father was only a few months old, so they had never known each other.
Wow.
So the next door neighbours, after meeting us, which in those days, as soon as you arrived, it was, get out a long neck of beer, let's have a beer together and whatever. So they found out that my father had never met his brother. They put us all in a car and drove us to Victoria so that my father could meet his brother for the first time.
Oh,
my father didn't own a car at that stage.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And that was the friendship
Yeah.
that they made.
So do you have any memories of, I mean, you would have been very young, some of those institutions that have already come and gone, like the Octagon and,
Pig promotions at the Octagon.
Yeah.
I can remember the very first time I wanted to go to an act at the Octagon. They used to have dances there all the time.
Yeah.
With big acts. And I'm talking about Axiom, The Zoot,
People like
Russell Morris,
Yeah.
big names of the time.
Yeah.
And I asked my parents, can I go? And they said no. And I knew that if I went, they would find out. So luckily, I knew someone whose sister was going out with the Central District's footballer. And they were going.
Right.
And of course, my parents loved Central Districts. And these people said they would take me and bring me home. So I was allowed to go.
Right.
So after I went to one and came home safely, they then thought, yes, she's safe to go to other ones. But of course, most of the people there were sitting up in the back seats. No one was watching the bands. They were all up there with boyfriends,
Yeah.
kissing and hugging. And
Did you go to the court ballroom? The court ballroom.
oh, yes, and Court Ballroom, of course. Before that was Court Ballroom. You know that?
No.
At the Elizabethtown Centre,
Yeah.
there was the deli and the pet shop, and it was opposite the snooker hall. So you had the big mall that led through to John Martin's. On one side was the snooker hall. On the other side, you would go upstairs, and there was a place called Court Ballroom. And every Friday night, they would have a dance for kids.
Yes.
And at the beginning of this evening,
They would teach
Mr.
you.
Halsbury would stand there and teach one dance. It would be a cha-cha or a samba or a waltz or something.
Yeah.
And you had to learn this dance, and then for the rest of the night, he would play the latest pop music, and you would all just dance. And then at the end of the night, the lights would dim down, and you would have the last waltz, usually sung by Engelbert Humperdinck. And you couldn't refuse to dance. If a man tapped you on the or a boy tapped you on the shoulder, you had to dance. I mean, and we're talking like 12 to 15, 12 to 16 year olds. Half the time there wasn't enough boys, so sometimes you had to be the boy as well. Yeah. It
Right.
was pretty depressing if a boy didn't ask you to dance and you had to be a boy.
You had to tap some girl on the shoulder after that. And what are your general recollections of growing up in Elizabeth during those early years? Because you're an Elizabeth original.
Well, yes,
Well
that's
and
right.
truly.
Yeah,
Well and truly.
I think probably the best thing about it was that we could, especially school holidays and whatever, you would. And my parents both worked. My mother worked at Hawke Sidley's, so they both worked on the base. They would leave the house to be at work for 8:30, and my brother and I would get up whenever we got up. They'd leave us with our 2 shillings each, which would do us for our chips, half a packet of Viscount, which we could buy a packet of 10 Viscount.
The cigarettes. Wow.
Your parents, what were they?
They didn't know we were buying the Viscount.
Oh, yeah. That makes sense.
But we could buy the 10 packet of Viscount, which would last us for a week. We could have a couple of Viscount cigarettes a day and a box of matches, and the shop owners didn't dob you in or anything because they were
Wow.
getting their money for
They're
the
making their
Viscount.
profit. Wow.
And we'd walk all the way from the south up to the quarry or your friend's house, and so long as you were home by dark, your parents didn't worry.
Yeah. Well, we were surrounded by paddocks and creeks and
Exactly, yeah.
just a real sense of freedom in that regard.
And
wildness.
if there was
It
anything
wild.
wrong, you just had to go and knock on someone's door.
Yeah.
And because there weren't a lot of women that worked back then, so you could just go and knock on a door and say, oh, Auntie or Mrs. So-and-so, my brother's just had a fall, can you help me? And they always helped because they knew that you would help them out. Because
Moya, what's your favourite, happiest memory?
probably some of my happiest memories are having pictures of 5 generations. Up until 3 years ago, there was my mother, me, my daughter, my granddaughter, and my great-granddaughter, you know.
Your mum was such a card, wasn't she?
Oh.
She was a card.
Going back to one of our reunions we had at the Octagon before that was pulled down, we had a reunion there. And one of the students in our class is a very good photographer.
Yes, yes.
And he wandered around taking some wonderful photos of the evening. So he presented them all to me to say, right, these are the ones we've got and what do you want to use for our next 1A1 get together. And the next thing I looked, and there's this picture, and I zoomed in on it because it was back to digital, and I zoomed in, and there's this woman with this beautiful red wine stain here, and it's my mother. She'd come down to the reunion. So, yeah, Mum was a bit of a card for that sort of thing, but...
But Ken was such a helpful and beautiful person. Wasn't
yeah, he was.
Ken?
Yeah, anything to do with Ken would have been... Ken was probably a bit like you say with your dad. He was there for everyone. He fought for the underdog.
Yes, absolutely.
All the time. No one... If someone was down and out, Ken was there picking them up and helping them all the time.
Yeah.
But he never neglected his family to do it.
But he was always there for you, really.
Oh,
Wasn't he?
absolutely.
He was always
Yeah.
there, always treating you like the queen, you know.
People used to say,
always
don't you
loving
two do anything separately?
Yeah, always loving
Yeah.
you, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Always. And yeah, just the other part of you, really, wasn't it?
Yeah,
It's a terrible thing to say for you.
it is.
I will love you till